So now I'm going to pass it over to Phil Claiborne, who's, as Eric mentioned, a former District 15 council member who's going to talk through the creation of the downtown Donelson UDO.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. It's a great crowd to come and listen to talking about a UDO. You'd think we had a comic coming in tonight, but thank you for being here. This is great, and this is a great place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, okay. Good, thank you. I was thinking last weekend about what I wanted to say during my part of this program, and I thought, I told my wife, I said, I don't want to ramble, and I want to make sure that I'm to the point and I don't leave out anything that I want to say. So I sat down at the computer and I wrote down my thoughts. So basically, I'm going to read you my thoughts, okay? Donelson had always enjoyed a unique quality related to a small town feel, and much of that can be credited to the Donelson Shopping Center. The center and the surrounding area served as something of a town center that provided shopping for much of the family needs. There was banking, there were restaurants, there were groceries, there was a medical clinic, there was a car dealership, there was a theater. You know, almost everything a small town would have was right here in Donelson. And with the advent of a couple of new shopping centers within quick driving distance, Kastner's, some of the other major stores that people shopped in, they began to move out, the center began to close, and Donelson reached a turning point that basically marked the beginning of a slow decline. When I ran for council in the summer of 2007, one of the most frequent questions that I was asked, if you're elected, what are you going to do to make Donelson a better place? At that time, Donelson had some of the lowest per square foot rental rates in the city, and it was slowly becoming a target for payday loan shops, beverage and tobacco stores, you know, almost everything that was undesirable in a community. So I took office as the district council member in September of 2007, and the following spring, the planning director was Rick Bernhardt, and he scheduled what he was calling a ride around in the district with all the new council members. And so when he came to District 15, the purpose basically was to listen to my concerns and my goals for the next 4 years. And during that ride, I explained to him the community's concern as well as my concern for the declining nature of the Lebanon Road Business District. And it was at that time that he suggested that we talk about at some point in time the possibility of a UDO, an urban design overlay for Donelson. So there were other things that needed to be gathering my attention there in those first year and a half or so. But after some follow-up meetings with Rick and members of the planning staff at that time, over the following year, I finally made the decision in January 2010 to begin a process for community engagement that eventually led to the creation of an overlay along Lebanon Road from Browley Parkway to Stewartsbury Pike. That decision turned into a 14-month process. We had 10 community meetings at McGavock High School. Some of you were probably in some of those meetings. There were 2 or 3 of them that reached between 250 and 300 people, which is amazing for a community to turn out and be involved in a planning process. These meetings were conducted by the planning staff, and they were designed to explain the benefits of the overlay and to collect information related to how residents wanted to see Donelson develop in the future, the kinds of businesses, the kind of services that they thought would be desirable. I personally had a number of one-on-one meetings during that period of time with business and property owners who had questions. I even met with some of their attorneys. And we did a couple of come-and-go charrettes at the 50 Forward for people to come in and look at diagrams and maps and information that the planning had and ask questions and get answers. And finally, in December the 9th, 2010, Ordinance BL 2010-79, creating the Downtown Donelson Urban Design Overlay District, passed the Planning Commission on consent. Major accomplishment. And on January the 19th, 2011, it passed the third reading in the council with a unanimous vote. So it was during the McGavick High meetings that I first met Jeff Syracuse. At the time, Jeff was the neighborhood watch captain in Donelson Hills, and he had what I would call a keen interest in my plans for Donelson. And in fact, he became what council members often refer to as a frequent caller. But those calls, a lot of those calls related to his neighborhood area. Obviously, he was interested in what he was trying to do there, eventually establishing a neighborhood association. But there were lots of questions and sometimes suggestions. And those calls eventually evolved into a friendship that will last forever, I think. And by the time I was at the midpoint of my second term, I approached Jeff with a suggestion of running for my seat when I term limited out. And he took some time to think about that, but eventually came back and said, yeah, I'll do that. So I basically spent a lot of time the last 2 years of my second term trying to mentor Jeff to take my place, because I knew that there were things that were in progress that I would never be able to finish. And I wanted to make sure that somebody took my place that would be able to pick up that ball and run with it and carry it through. I knew the significance of the impact of the UDO would be years in coming, and I felt Jeff had both the passion and the ability to take the groundwork that I had provided and shepherd that into growing reality. Today, there is still much to be accomplished, but Donelson is a much different community than the one I inherited in the fall of 2007. The UDO stopped the decline, but as the saying goes, it takes a while to turn a train around. And Councilman Syracuse is to be credited with much of the work of doing that turnaround. The UDO provided the guidance for doing that, and now Jeff, Jeff Gregg has the privilege of taking that plan and carrying it further, the responsibility for continuing what was started in 2010. I think it is a rare occurrence for a council district in Metro Nashville to have the kind of consistent leadership Donelson, Two Rivers, and Pennington Bend has had over the past 17 years. I think that's a great example of what Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 3 when he spoke about one who plants, one who waters, and one who makes things grow. Today we have celebrated the opening of what I affectionately call the crown jewel of the Downtown Donelson Urban Design Overlay District. And all along with current development and some pending development on land that's on the other side around the Music City Star Station, Donelson is on track to become a community that is once again focused on a town center that promotes a sense of pride and unity the way it did in the 50s and the 60s. So thank you very much. And so Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. So I am going to speak more specifically to some of the technical details of the Downtown Donelson UDO. So let's go ahead and take a look under the hood for how it actually works. So in response to the robust community visioning process that Phil just described, the Downtown Donelson area was subdivided into 5 different sub-districts. So each one of these districts has its own unique character. It has its own set of community goals and objectives that were created through the visioning process. And then each sub-district also has a set of regulations that help to implement those goals. So this map regulates specifically higher level, more general land uses. So commercial, residential, industrial, office, and then the appropriate locations for each one of those land uses. And the overall objective here, as Emily spoke to earlier, is for a little bit higher intensity, higher concentration and mixture of uses, higher height along the Lebanon Pike corridor, and particularly around the WeGo Star transit commuter rail stop, and then transitioning or stepping down to the neighborhood along the edges. And this is for the purpose of creating that walkable, pedestrian-oriented, pedestrian-friendly, compact downtown environment that the community has said that they would like to see here. Okay, so this is an illustrative plan only, but this zooms into the Subdistrict 1, which is transit-oriented development subdistrict. And it's not meant to show the exact location of buildings or other elements, but more to illustrate the community goals and desires for this particular subdistrict of the downtown Donelson UDO. So you may or may not be familiar with the term transit-oriented development, but essentially what it is, it's a mixture of uses in a compact area clustered around a transit hub, which this kind of fits the bill perfectly. So you'll see buildings, rather than being very set back from the street so that they're harder to get to on foot, they're brought up to the back of sidewalk. So you have doors, exits, entrances, windows that activate the public realm, that animate the streetscape. Then you'll see the parking lots, rather than being located in the front, they're hidden to the back, so to the side or to the rear of the building. So you're not having to traverse a large, vast parking lot to get to that on foot or by bike. And then there was also a desire to start to complete the street grid to create more vehicular connections. So you might see a few more streets in here than what currently exist. And then increase bicycle and pedestrian amenities. So this is very important for a transit-oriented, walkable environment, is to have more sidewalks, safer sidewalks, bicycle routes, and then more publicly accessible parks and open spaces. So these are essentially the high-level goals. Okay. So, we'll just take a second. As Emily mentioned earlier, much of the base zoning would not be able to accomplish those goals. So what we had prior to the UDO adoption was commercial limited and commercial services, which could not accomplish the kind of some of the moderate density that you need to support transit, some of the more form-based, bringing that building to the street, etc. So the UDO then enabled us to reach those community goals through implementing that overlay that then superseded the base zoning. Okay, so how do we turn the community goals and desires into specific regulations? How do they get built? How do they get implemented? Well, specifically to the Donelson UDO, we regulate height, setbacks, and the orientation of the building on the lot. So I apologize, this is not in downtown Donelson, as you can see, but on the upper left photo, the max number of stories is 4 there. Everything else is below that line. So you could conjecture that there's a maximum height limit of 4 stories, right? And each one of those sub-districts that you saw earlier on the previous map has a max height limit to it that fits the desired character. You can also see that these buildings are right at the back of sidewalk. They don't have a very large setback or parking in front, so that you have doors and windows that activate or animate. They bring pedestrian life to the streetscape. And then of course you don't see parking in front. That's in the downtown Donelson UDO, it's to the side or to the rear, so that has a lot to do with building orientation. Then there are also limits on impervious surface. So you can't just have a vast parking lot, a sea of asphalt. You have to have some green space, some landscaping. And then there are pretty robust landscaping requirements, streetscape requirements, and signage as well. So the photo on the upper right, you see a surface parking lot that has a planted area encircling it. That's called a street yard. That's also one of the requirements in the UDO. If you have a parking lot on the side, it's facing a street, you want to obscure the view of that parking lot from the street and green it up a bit. Okay, so another way that desired form is achieved is through development incentives. So these are not required, they're opt-in. And the Donelson UDO has a number of incentives whereby a developer can acquire a few more square footage of building area if they implement one of these programs. So one of them is low impact design. This is essentially stormwater management. And so you can see here on the upper left photo, this is the detention area with hydrophilic or water-loving plants here, and it'll hold water and the plants will absorb them and it won't infiltrate water. Then you can also provide a publicly accessible plaza. So you can see here on the upper right at the intersection of these two streets, it's on private property, but it's available to the public, so more public open space. And then leasable space that addresses the ground floor, so activated storefronts at the ground level. And then you can also provide transit amenities. So those are some of the opt-in programs of the Donelson UDO. And then I mentioned the importance of connectivity earlier, so there is a street network map that also has to be implemented as sites develop. And this will show proposed streets, proposed pedestrian connections, and alleys as well. Okay, so what does the UDO prevent? Well, it will prevent your typical auto-oriented design. There's a drive-through example up here. But because you have like a facade requirement along the front, along the street edge here, this would not meet the UDO requirements because that building has to activate the streetscape. You have the impervious surface requirement, so you can't have that vast sea of asphalt there. And then you also have something, this gets a little technical, but it's called FAR, but you can't have like a tiny little building and then everything else is asphalt and no greenery. And then there are 2 curb cuts here. You're only allowed to have 1 curb cut per lot, so that helps with access management and traffic flow along the main corridor as well. Okay. So what does the UDO enable? Well, there's a good example right here that I'm sure you're familiar with. But the UDO will enable bringing that building up to the street, as you can see, putting the parking to the side or to the rear, having mixed use. I hear there's a really delicious bagel shop there on the ground floor, enhanced streetscape, on-street parking, and this could not be built under the existing base code. Okay. So now I'm going to pass off to Jeff Syracuse to talk about the future of the downtown Donelson UDO. Thank you.
All right. So as Phil said, once he put the foundation in place, my job was implementation. And I think Phil and I have talked about this a couple times before. We never envisioned that Donelson and really all of Nashville would do this. After the Great Recession, after the major flood we had in May of 2010, we never anticipated that Nashville would just come back in such a huge way. We thought the implementation of the UDO would take a lot longer. Well, growth was happening downtown and it was headed out towards the neighborhoods. And so I will tell you that in my 8 years, I got busier and busier and busier as the years went on. The calls kept coming. So a UDO doesn't really just envision what you don't have that you want. It also capitalizes on the things that you do have. This plaza, as you may, for those of you that are here this morning, this plaza has always been the core of Donelson, the heart of Donelson, the memories of that, especially of those that grew up with this plaza. Remember how important it was to them, the Christmas time, the shops and whatnot. And as Phil mentioned, how it kind of it started to go downhill in the 90s. It was an aging shopping center. It was one of the oldest commercial strip centers in all of Nashville. There's a picture in the late 50s of an airplane going up while all this was being built. It's a pretty extraordinary picture. So it envisioned that we revitalize the heart of Donelson. The other thing that we had that it capitalized on, and we talked about transit-oriented development. What does that mean? Well, right across the street, you have the first train station right outside of downtown. You have the first commuter rail station just outside of the urban core. And so the whole idea of an urban design overlay, remember when this shopping center was being built, the whole community was going from rural to suburban. The UDO now envisions to go from suburban to urban. And it starts with a civic anchor, and it starts with capitalizing the fact that you've got an opportunity to turn a train station from a park and ride to a get out your door and ride. And that's the direction that we're headed. Okay. So it was serendipitous that when I took office, I noticed that Donelson was at the top of the list for a new library. And as I mentioned this morning, I could write a book about where the library was going to go, where the library was looking to put it. It was not a great spot. And the opportunity to engage a new owner of this shopping center, the old owner was in South Florida. They didn't have any desire to really engage with the community. In fact, when I finally got to them, they told me, we're kind of close to selling this property to this, basically it's a pension fund in Ohio. And like a pension fund, their desire is mailbox money. They want to buy something that just kind of generates cash for them. They didn't have a desire to reinvest. Holiday Properties came in and said, we like the UDO. We like the vision. We like this as a long-term opportunity for us to really capitalize on that. And they did. And I think that this will go down as one of the great private-public partnerships in all of Nashville. It penciled out. It made the numbers work. This plaza was not a very desirable piece of property for people to buy, is the reality. It needed a lot of work. But where it made sense was when you took the vision of the UDO to have a civic anchor and put it right across the street from that transit-oriented development area. We don't have a town center, like a square, like Franklin or Murfreesboro or Gallatin or Lebanon or whatnot, but we did have the plaza. And the opportunity to put a civic anchor in the middle of it was just an extraordinary opportunity. And so we got to work with Holiday Properties and Metro. They bought the plaza, Metro bought a piece of the plaza from them, the numbers worked out, we shared infrastructure costs, and we were able to create this beautiful place that we're sitting in today. The next piece is the piece that's going to take a little bit longer, but like Phil set the foundation for me, I'm hopeful that I'm going to set the foundation, that I have set the foundation for Councilmember Gregg. When you're dealing with a train station, you're automatically dealing with a bit of federal government. That's an additional layer of bureaucracy, red tape, difficulty. And so to actually take that train station, what you see in that picture here is the vision that H.G. Hill put together to say, we own a lot of that land anyway. Why couldn't we be part of that development private-public partnership to take that train station and meet the vision of the UDO? And that is the direction that we're headed in. So H.G. Hill has what they call an exclusive negotiating arrangement with WeGo. They are working on that now. I'm hopeful by this fall, let's say maybe winter, that we'll actually take this conceptual design and actually have some more details about what that train station is going to look like. A true regional transit hub where in the future a bus from the airport could come meet there, you get on the train, you could go downtown and back and forth. The other piece, that it's a whole other chapter in the book, is making that train run more often, I know. But it is a chicken and the egg scenario. Which do you do first? So we're working on it. But the foundation has been set for that, and this is the core of the UDO. Civic site, revitalized shopping center, transit right across the street. You can envision it. What's got in 10, 20 years, when this is a walkable area? I could live right there. I could come to the library. I could go to the coffee shop. I hop on the train, I go downtown to work. The opportunity of what Donelson's future is going to be is possible because of the work that my predecessor did to lay that foundation. So these two core pieces are the private-public pieces. Private market, I think, will really kind of take care of the rest. So it's been a wild 8 years, more than that, to make this happen. And then in the next 8 years, hopefully we're going to see what the train station can truly become, and substantiate that we're going to eventually make it run.